Welcome into our WTOL 11 Sports Podcast. I've got Josh Lindke with me this week. He is the new head football coach at Otsego High School. Josh, we have a whole bunch we can get into here over however long this takes us. That's the beauty of this thing is, like, I have literally no plan on how long we're going to go. I have no plan on what I'm going to ask you. I just want to, like, we'll just talk, and we'll see where the world takes us. You go with that?
Yeah, those are the best podcasts.
Yeah, I like that.
Make for the best ones.
Yeah, we'll just kind of sit and see what happens. Let's just kind of start. Give everybody a little bit of background to you, because you are a new head coach this year, but you're not new to the coaching game. But you are still young. I mean, you're still a baby in terms of the coaching game. Give everybody kind of an idea. What's your background? Where'd you start, and all those kind of things?
Yeah, listen to your episode with Greg the other day. I think I'm about the same age as he's been around. So, but yeah, I've been in coaching. This is my 10th year now. 9 as an assistant, first as a head coach. Started out. I graduated from Anthony Wayne in 2012. Played for Craig Smith there, and then went and played college baseball for a year, blew my arm out, didn't really muster to anything. So I came back and knew I kind of wanted to get into coaching. So fell into a job at Anthony Wayne with Craig, was coaching some baseball out there for Coach Nell as well, and was a receivers coach in a wing T offense for 2 years. So, but I was at my alma mater, just kind of getting into the game, just learning how to, kind of facilitate, drills and how to just learn how to be a coach, deal with kids that are, almost the same age as you. And then was there for 2 years, had a great time, got to coach with, some former guys that actually coached me, which was a lot of fun, and then had the opportunity to go to Bowling Green and worked as a student assistant there with Dino Babers and Mike Jinks. So was there with Dino, and we won the MAC title in 2015, and then with Mike Jinks in 2016, which was a little bit rougher year. But I tell everybody all the time, it was like my master's in offense, offensive football, and just learning the game of football, X's and O's wise, was able to just kind of learn from a number of different guys. Sean Lewis, who's now the head coach at Kent State, was I've got to work with him day in and day out. Andrew Sauter, who's the OC there, and then when Coach Jinks came in, Seth Dagey, who was in the league for a number of years, got to work with him. Got to be around his brother when he came around. When he got on campus. So just being able to learn offensive spread football was phenomenal for me there. And then Dan Chipka got the job at Central Catholics, or excuse me, at St. Francis. So
you can't mix those. You can't mix those up. You can't. They have to be separate. You can't mix those up. You have to be very careful.
Yep. So Dan Chipka got the job there and went over there for 2 years. I was about 23 years old when I got the OC job there. And so when I was there, I was kind of just learning trial by fire. Really had no idea what I was doing, and was kind of thrown into some big time situations, which was nice and good for my development. But then Greg called, and I've been was at Central for 3 years with him, and his staff's phenomenal. Just learning to not just only run a football program, but run a championship football program, and what that takes day in and day out. Really I think helped prepare me for the situation that I'm in now. So
all right, there's a lot to unpack there. Let's go back to your high school days as a quarterback in a wing T offense. I feel like I can say this because we share this in common. You're not the biggest dude in the world. I get it. Yeah. To be the quarterback in a wing T offense, though, what was that experience like?
It was a lot of fun. Like I said, there's a lot of. I think I went a whole year, my junior year, probably throwing the ball maybe 20 times, 25 times. So every time I throw a ball now, like people that know me, they're like, "Yeah, that's why you're a wing T quarterback." But I had a decent arm, so. But no, it was fun. Tons of fun, and just learn that kind of offense, and then be accustomed to now, which is what we run at Otsego and what I've been a part of for the last 7 or 8 years of my coaching career, a spread offense. It's cool to kind of know the ins and outs of both. And we were able to do some things in that wing T offense with Craig. Craig entrusted me with some stuff to make some checks at the line, things like that. So that's kind of where I started to learn and develop a little bit, that maybe I've got more of a higher IQ for the game of football than I originally maybe thought, and being able to do something past playing could have been an option, ended up being an option for me.
I mean, how much does that help you as a coach to be able to know different styles, different things, especially in a league like the Northern Buckeye Conference? You're going to face Eastwood, who will run some similar stuff to what you ran in high school.
Yep.
How much do those kind of things help?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't try to pin myself as some defensive expert because I'm not. I leave that to our defensive coordinators, Matt Roan and Kurt Hartman, who's over there as well. We run a 3-4 style defense, which is made to kind of stop the wing T for that league. So it gives me some insight. Obviously, just I can kind of throw in some suggestions here and there. It's kind of fun. You're around the spread offense for so many years, being in the track, and then being in the college football level. That kind of coming back to this league now, you're getting to see some of the older school stuff, which is fun to be a part of. So 2 out of the 3 teams two out of the 3 teams that we play the first 3 weeks are all wing T offenses. Yeah. So it's cool to kind of see it all come back around.
Let's go back to your college days where you were helping out at BGSU. What were those days like, and what kind of things did Dino Babers and Mike Jinks kind of have you doing?
Yeah, so I tell people I was in the equipment room at one point, like getting dudes laundry, and it wasn't all like the glory of just getting to coach college football, but riding the games even at times with Tommy Rapier, who was the equipment coordinator there, like just doing all sorts of little things. Like when you talk about being a student assistant, like people ask like what's a student assistant mean, or what's a quality control mean? It's like you do anything and everything they ask you to do. So just stuff like that, and getting drills set up before practice. And then the cool thing about that is that if you get around guys that you really start to build a relationship with, coaches, they will entrust you with more things. So you show that you can do one task correctly and do it well and do it on time, you get another one, and then you get another one. Before I left there, we were doing this deal called Friday Night Ball with Jinx, that we'd have our walkthrough with the older guys, the guys that were going to play on Saturday, Friday morning early, and then we would do like a simulated scrimmage type deal with the incoming freshmen or the red shirt kids. And I was coaching kids up and then getting in the film room with those guys because Daggy and those guys entrust me with stuff like that. So that was a really, really neat experience for me.
What's maybe the weirdest request or thing you had to do as a student assistant or QC? What's the weirdest thing you had to do? Can you think of anything weird?
Yeah, get coffee for people. That's a real thing.
Yeah.
Go let somebody's dog out. You get stuff like that. Go pick up somebody from the airport. That's all. When you hear guys talk about stuff like that, like GAs when they first start, that's all real. That's what you do.
It's called paying your dues, I think.
Yes.
And
the funny thing about that is that you want to just live at the office because you're I don't know what they're going to ask me to do next. So you're you don't want to leave because then you might get a text and be like, hey, you still around? And then you left, and then you're feeling like, man, I should rush back. So
how many hours were you putting in?
You'd have class, you'd go to class and then practice, whatever else. But then, even in off season, like in the springtime, not that really the spring's off season either, but anytime that you were, I'd put it this way, anytime you weren't in class, you were at the facility. Just even if you weren't really doing a whole lot, you were just sitting in the office waiting for them to tell you to do something. So
it wasn't, and this wasn't that long ago. We're not talking like this was a long time. You've kind of gone through this process pretty quickly. How do you think you've elevated yourself to get and put yourself into these positions at such a young age?
I think just studying the game of football, and then I've been fortunate enough to be around some really good people and some really good programs. I think that's the biggest thing. People ask all the time, how do you kind of rise so quickly at a young age? And I try to tell people, you want to, go be a position coach at a winning program, first and foremost. That's kind of what I was an OC at St. Francis and kind of took a step back to go be with Dempsey at Central, and it was the best thing for my career. I don't really have any other testament to just being around good people, being around good programs at the right time, and networking myself a little bit, and then really studying the game of football. If you don't take the time to study, if this is something you really want to do at a young age and kind of climb the ranks, you got to live, breathe, eat, sleep it. When you're not having some social interaction with other people. So,
talk about that time with Greg Dempsey, because I think he's kind of the gold standard in this area. When you think about coaching high school football, Greg Dempsey's the guy everybody wants to try to emulate. He's had the most success. Everybody would want to do that. What was it about him that you think that makes him so darn good?
His work ethic is unmatched. Him and Ryan Brown, who's the DC there, been the DC for a number of years. They try to beat each other into work every morning. I don't think there was a time. There might have been. I could count on, and I got to work early there because it just, when you get over there, you can feel it in the air. Just the level of expectation, the level of work ethic. He's got. Every position coach on staff could go be a head coach or a coordinator elsewhere. And so when you're there, you want to up your game as well. So and he sets that standard. standard without even really having to say anything, just because of the success that he's kind of bred throughout the years. So being around that, when he's breaking down film for hours on end, I mean, as a position coach, why wouldn't you want to be doing the same if your head coach is putting in that amount of time? And then you want to do more and more and more so he can entrust you with more and more and more. So just being around him and just seeing the way that he does things on a consistent basis, day in and day out, the work ethic, and then honestly, I think him having the ability to kind of grow with the game. I think you see a lot of older coaches that kind of wean themselves out because they don't allow themselves to change who they are a little bit. Yeah. Greg has brought in a number of young guys on staff. I mean, Eric Page is still over there. Him and I worked together last year, and we were able to do a lot of things in the passing game, and Eric and I were able to give him a lot in terms of the RPO, pass game, things like that. That he's kind of. I mean, I just watched their game the other night, and they were chucking the ball over the yard still, and so it kind of shows his evolution that he's able to kind of. I mean, the one guy in this area that's won 3 state titles, he could be somebody that's arrogant and be like, no, it's my way or the highway, but he's the furthest thing from that, that's who you want to work for, and he allows his assistants to kind of grow into their own role as well, which is really cool.
I know you and I have talked behind the scenes a little bit as you were looking at some head coaching jobs around the area the last couple off seasons, and you weren't gonna just go take a job just to be a head coach. Why is that?
Because I had the best job in the city. I mean, coaching quarterbacks at Central Catholic was the best job in the area. I tell people that. I mean, I think a lot of guys get into this mindset of they just want to be the guy, and they don't care what job it is. When they don't, sometimes when you pull back the covers of some of those jobs, you don't want to be in some of those situations because then you get stuck, or you go somewhere and you don't have some success, and now all of a sudden you have a hard time if you want to get out finding a job elsewhere. You got to take that step back. So for me, it was really like I wanted to make sure that we were going to go somewhere that was set up for success and had a good infrastructure. And Kevin O'Shea and those guys at Otsego, Coach Jerwald did a phenomenal job up to this point building the program to where it's at. There's still things that we have to continue to get better at, but you go in and you sit down, you interview with those people, and then you kind of say, hey, this is something I want to be a part of. So and that's really what happened with Otsego. I mean, from the outside looking in, it looked like a great small school job because of the success that they were having. But then once I got in and sat down with the people and kind of met with them, I mean, it was a no-brainer at that point.
Kevin O'Shea, that'll be my weekly Maumee shout out. I feel like there's got to, like last week I talked about Kevin Parkins, who's in charge at Central Catholic. Kevin O'Shea out in the Otsego School District.
He's a super and the principal now.
The principal. Yeah, I told him. I said you're kind of crazy. You know that, right? But let me tell you, Kevin O'Shea. So back in the day, Kevin graduated maybe a year or two ahead of me at Maumee. He was like the dude at Maumee. Like he was the guy that all the little kids growing up were all like, that's Kevin O'Shea. Like, everybody knew who he was. He was kind of one of those larger-than-life figures on the Maumee campus. He was a stud in football, stud in basketball. Like, everybody just kind of saw him, and now he's a superintendent and principal out there. All right, so as you go through the interviewing process, when did you know that Otsego was the right fit?
When I was sitting in there talking to people and just knowing, what they were going to bring to the table, fortunate for me being able to get a job in the building as well was a huge thing for me. I just think that it's so tough as a head coach at any sport, at any level, if you're not in the building with those kids day in and day out. It makes it tough to kind of build your culture and just kind of keep tabs on them from the day-to-day standpoint. But when I was going through that process and just like it wasn't an interview. It was, Kevin. It was a relaxed environment. We were just kind of talking, and it wasn't like I didn't have to feel like I had to be somebody else than myself. So that was kind of when I knew that hey, this is somewhere that I could be.
You talk about culture. I think everybody freaking talks about
the buzzword.
Like everybody's we've got to build our culture. Like, what does that look like?
Yeah.
Like, what does that actually mean to you?
I think, to me, culture doesn't look like what you do when let's say you take over a job and it's your first 30 days, because everybody talks about that at that point. Like, I got to build my culture. Your culture is when you're on day 342 and you've been there for a minute, and what does your day-to-day look like? That's what your culture is to me. So I think just trying to give the kids a steady diet of like who you actually are day in and day out, set set the expectations of what you want your program to look like, and then try to follow through as best as you can. And I think, honestly, culture can change year to year as well, because I think it depends on the climate of your program as well. Something that Demps has told me before, like, you could have a different kind of culture every year with different team, because you might have a team that's very senior-lated that kind of leads it, and then you might have a team the next year that's uber talented, but you got to have a coaching staff that kind of pushes them day in and day out to get better each day. So I think it can be a changing thing, but I think it's just your kids got to see you kind of go about a certain way with how you do your business as a head football coach, and then your entire staff, it's got to bleed into them too.
How'd you know you were ready? Like, is there like a moment where you kind of like, you think, okay, I've watched, I've sat through, I've done all this. Like, is there like a moment where it clicks to you where you're like, I know I can go run my own program now?
I mean, there's been moments where, like, since I've taken this job, where I'm like, maybe I'm not ready. But, and that's more like the off the field stuff you deal with as a head coach. But that's the biggest headache. But I don't know. I don't know that there was like ever an aha moment for me. I also knew that like this was down the road for me at some point. I didn't know how quickly it was going to happen. But I also feel confident in saying that I think that I've earned the opportunity to get this opportunity, so and I've done all the things to put myself in position to have this opportunity. I feel like I'm the best prepared to go, hopefully succeed. We still got a long way to go, but I felt like that, let's go try it. Now's the time. I mean, my wife and I don't have any kids. We've got two French bulldogs, so like we've got a life at home to where like it can allow me to kind of put in the long hours, so to speak, as a head coach. But surrounding myself with guys on my staff that have a ton of experience. Like I talk about Kurt Hartman. Like Kurt has been around. I mean, he was a DC at Whitmer when Chris Wormling, those guys were there. Yep. Like having him on my staff is like, that's comforting for me as a young head coach. I don't have a bunch of young guys that I am now trying to coach on top of that. So having guys like that also helps me feel like, hey, I'm ready to go do this too.
So I myself have coached like high school baseball during the summer, and I've coached my daughter's softball teams, and like I get what it's. But when you're and I don't even think we mentioned, how old are you?
29. I just turned 29. So when I got this job, I was 28.
It's ridiculous. So, but like when you're that close in age to your players, do you feel like you can relate to them, and how do you almost have to separate being boys with your players, but also having to be the head coach? Like, where's that line?
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up, because like that's kind of the transition. Like when I was an assistant, like it's easy to just kind of like be boys with them a little bit and not have to worry about like, I also have to be the head coach too and kind of set that standard. But again, I also go back to like they still have to know who you are as a person. Like me being like a authoritarian figure and just like hooting and hollering and screaming all the time, like that's not who I am. Now I have found out that like since I've become a head coach, like I have started to yell more, because like it's just like I feel like the stuff like the Dempsey, like all the your mind is going 100 miles an hour nonstop. So like, but no, I mean, I truly try to be who I am, but I also try to let them know that like, hey, this is our standard. This is what our process of how we're going to do things. And like, but I also know that like, if I want to be friends with them, not friends, but like still have that boy type, atmosphere, I also have to know what I'm talking about on the other end of things. Sure. Like I can't not know what I'm talking about in terms of X's and O's, culture, building a program, and then try to have the other aspect to it as well. You got to kind of have both if you want to have that, more of a friendship type role with the kids.
Like, I don't want to say you fell into the best possible situation of all time, but like you took over a program that won 20 straight regular season games. Like that, most of the time that doesn't happen when your first head coaching job. You earned it. I don't mean it. I'm not saying that like pejoratively.
That streak's at 22 now.
Yeah, I was gonna say you've won your first 2 games now. That's it's unreal when you think taking over a program that's won 20 straight regular season games. What is that? What has that been like to know that these dudes come in and they expect to win already?
Right. Well, it's funny you say that. Like there was a massive exodus of really good players at that program. Talk about Joe Durwal, Trent Leiter, Kuhn. I mean, just a number of good football players that exited out of there along with Coach Durwal. And I can't say enough good things about Coach Durwal. I mean, him and I just talk for he still teaches in the building. So him and I talk daily because there's always something that comes up and I'm like, hey, what did you think of this? Or what did you do with this? So being able to take over for a guy like that, and him and I are pretty different in terms of styles, but just, the kids expect to win. The kids know what that looks like. They know what hard work looks like, which is really good for me to kind of come in. I tell people all the time, like, I didn't have to come in and like uproot a culture. It was kind of set, and we're still doing something. We've got to change some things that we want to do our way, but and then again, having a staff that I was able to retain with the number of guys that have been on staff, and then bring some new faces in to give some fresh ideas. It really is a blessing in disguise that I was able to kind of fall into this job, so to speak.
You said it now, so I don't feel so bad. All right, good. Thank you.
21-2 the past 2 years. I mean, no regular season losses. I mean, not many first-time head coaches, let alone at 28 years old, get an opportunity like this. So, and on top of that, to get a job in the building as well.
Walk me through that first Friday night as you're leading your team out to the field as a head coach for the first time. Like, where were the butterflies? Where was... Like, what were you thinking?
Yeah.
It was like, oh crap, what did I just do? Like, what did I do?
Yeah.
Or are we prepared? Like,
yes.
what's that feeling like?
Yeah, it's everything goes through your mind. Like, just every single possible scenario goes through your mind. And then we had an hour and a half bus trip too. We had to go play a tough Winford program, which they've been down a little bit the last couple of years, but they've notoriously been very good, like 8-2, 7-3 at worst. And they're starting to build it back up a little bit. So that was a tough, gritty win for our kids. And then, our coaching staff did a phenomenal job. But, in terms of pregame stuff, I mean, I was nervous. I'm not going to sit here and lie and say that I wasn't nervous. I wasn't nervous about the X's and O's part of the game. I was more nervous about the game management. Yeah. Am I going to screw up a timeout? Am I going to, decline a penalty when I should have accepted a penalty? But again, that's where, like, having a security blanket, like a guy like Kurt Hartman, where I could, hey, Kurt, what do you think? Like, and then he's been around a lot of football, so I'm kind of able to lean on him a little bit. So, and, but having those guys in place to kind of let them do their job and to know that I don't have to do it all either. Like, I've got guys around me that I'm able to kind of, pardon some things off to that they can give me some great advice. So I was nervous for sure, but, it was great to get. And what a way, my wife's laughing. She's like, we finished that game last year at Central Catholic in overtime against Avon with the way we lost.
Heartbreaker, yeah.
Yep. And then my first game as a head coach, like, we get a defensive stop on 4th down. They're on our 5-yard line. It's 4th and 1, and we get a stop with like a minute 30 left. So,
have you caught yourself like having to like not yell at a referee? Like, have you like tried to like restrain yourself and know that like you have to?
That's tough because
people watching and stuff.
That and then the referees. I mean, it's a struggle with them too. Like, they're just losing guys left and right. So you don't want to be, you don't want to act like a fool on the sidelines and kind of have that reputation as well. So, but yeah, it's tough. And then it's like you're trying to find the best place to, like, because there is times, like, I learned from Dempsey a little bit. There's times when you want to argue calls, and there's times where, like, you got to just let stuff go. So that's kind of, trying to find your way to pick where am I going to pick my battles in terms of arguing and things like that. So, and then just trying to remember guys' names. Like, they give you the scorecard, they give you their little sheet, and you're like, you want to go yell at the guy, and you're like, what was his name? So you got to kind of pull that out. So, because it sounds more personable if you're like saying his name, you'll get his attention better rather than just saying, hey you, or hey ref. So,
like, I didn't even think about, like, in your first year, like, you have to make sure you don't get that reputation as like a guy who just whines about everything.
Right.
You can't, like, I didn't even think about that. That is a challenge in your first year as a head coach. You don't want to have, because here's the deal, referees, I mean, that's a tight knit community.
Oh yeah,
they're gonna start talking.
They're
like,
just like us, the coaches. It's the same thing, just on their end, So you don't want to, you don't want to get on their bad side, especially early, because you're like, and then that who's this young guy that thinks that he's whatever. So
I've been doing this 35 years, kid. Got socks older than you.
Yeah,
that's gonna come.
Well,
out.
Bob Olin, the Eden head coach, we went to a 7-on-7, and this is a funny story. We went to a 7-on-7 with them. I believe we were out. I can't remember where we were out at, but. We were out at Archbold over the summer, and I went up to him. We were getting ready to play them next, and I went up to him and kind of like tapped him on the shoulder and was asking him a few questions. And he looked at me. He's like, "Who are you?" I was like, I'm the head coach at Otsego. He's like, "You look like you're 12." And I'm like, so
that feels like a very Bob Olin thing to say.
And then he remembered like who I was because we had met previously. He's like, I apologize. But that was a funny moment. So.
That's fantastic. I feel like you're going to have a few more of those.
Yeah.
I mean, there's going to be a few more of those moments for you.
And I just think about, too, like just some of the, the pregame head coaches meetings, just the the guys that I'll get the chance to talk to, which is pretty cool. You talk about like Craig Rutherford at Eastwood, just Drew's Beck at Rossford, like just a number of guys that have been around a number of years that have kind of done a lot of good things for Northwest Ohio football. That I'll get, like Casey Moeller with our game this week, like at Liberty Center. I mean, that's a huge, notorious program that, and he's been around for a couple of years now. And that, just the opportunity to kind of have those conversations with guys pregame is kind of, you got to have you pinch yourself a little bit when you're like, I'm sitting in this seat now and I get to have these conversations.
A guy like you who was an assistant coach, becoming a head coach, are you learning how to delegate? And have you been able to like let your assistants do stuff that you're like, oh, and I can just do this myself, but then you're like, no, I have to delegate. Like, have you tried to learn how to do all that?
Yeah, I think so. But I'm also kind of going through the transition. Like I tell my wife all the time, because she's of course like, you need to delegate, because she wants more time with me. But but I'm kind of going through the transition, because when you're a first time head coach, like you want to learn about everything too, because you want to learn like, well, okay, what can I delegate, and what can I trust my guys to kind of handle, and then what do I need to handle myself? I mean, there's a number of things. Just defensively, I'm pretty hands off. I mean, Kurt and Matt Roan, who's our co-DC, they can handle things, for the most part on our defense. So I'm pretty hands off with that. I give my suggestions if need be. I have found myself that I've got to get a lot more involved in special teams the last couple of weeks, which is kind of just having that head coach's presence, on special teams is just, a huge factor as well. So, and that's something that I've never really had much experience with. I've been an offensive guy my entire career. So that's been fun too, to kind of get involved in that as well. But then even just managerial stuff that you find out, like when guys tell you they get out of this business because they, it's all the stuff that's off the field. It's not the coaching football. It's all the stuff that you kind of have to deal with off the field, that kind of runs people out a little bit, that I'm kind of finding out. But it's fun too. I mean, it's just, I used to be able to keep everything in my head of what I needed to do, but now I find myself, I have to write everything in my office on my whiteboard. Otherwise, because so many things go through your mind, and then you get pulled so many different directions that if you don't write stuff down, you're going to be in trouble.
Your wife learning how to be a coach's wife too? She has to understand. Is she understanding all that goes into this as well?
Yeah.
Like I've noticed on socials and stuff, like she's like your biggest fan.
Yeah.
And like she's right there cheering for you, and she has had to switch allegiances a couple times throughout this thing. Like, is she learning how that works?
Well, it's funny story you bring that up, and but like when we left St. Francis to go to Central, she packed up the St. Francis stuff as quick. I've never seen her pack it up as quick. She's like, "Yep, let's go to," and so like, and when I'm like looking to take another job, I always know like her reaction, her facial expressions, like if this is a good move or not. Like when I was going from BG to take the OC job at St. Francis, she was like, "Yep, this is it." And when I was going from St. Francis to Central, it was like, I kind of get that reaction from her, like this is a no-brainer. And then when I was going through this process to become the head coach at Otsego, it was like, I came home and she just kind of looks at me and she starts laughing. She's like, "This is it, isn't it?" And I'm like, "Yep, this is it." So she's been great though. I mean, she's everything you could ask for in a coach's wife. I mean, her and her family come to every single game. They don't miss a beat. Her dad is about as invested as you can be, so he's texting me nonstop, which is really cool. But yeah, she's been great. I mean, she's learning that stuff like this. It's kind of all the extracurriculars that come with being a head coach. She's like, I got this obligation on this day. I got this. So what we've been starting to do is like, and I just been texting her like on Sunday night and saying, here, you got record of it. Here's what my week looks like. Like, this is what I'm doing, at this hour. Cause it's, you got a lot of other stuff that goes on when you become a head coach besides just coaching football. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, man, I really appreciate you coming in. Just let's talk about the big one this weekend. Like, I mean, Liberty Center, they made that deep playoff run. They've got as good a football history and tradition as anybody. How excited are you for this challenge, trying to get to 3-0?
Yeah, this will be a huge challenge for our kids in our program. Just really excited about the atmosphere that it's going to bring Friday night. I mean, that was my first small school football experience the other night.
I was saying you've been at all these big schools. Like Anthony Wayne's a pretty big school, but Anthony Wayne's like a big school, but has a small town
school feel.
Yeah,
correct. Yeah,
like that's what I've learned living out there. Is it like it's a big school, but it also has that small town feel, which is cool because it's 3 different communities all coming together.
Yep. Similar to Otsego. I mean, it's
Yeah.
a bigger scale, but Otsego is very similar. A couple different communities coming together. Because you got Tuntogny, you got Grand Rapids, you got Haskins. But yeah, it was a really cool. I mean, when you talk about everybody goes to the game, everybody goes to the game. So we're really fired up. Just to see the atmosphere Friday night. I think it's going to be phenomenal for our kids to play in and against a historic program in Liberty Center. I mean, they made a deep run last year. They got a lot of skill returning from last year as well, and they're a really good football team. It's going to be a really good challenge for our kids and our program and our coaches, but we're excited for it.
All right, I appreciate you, buddy. Thanks for coming in, and keep this thing rolling.
Will do. Appreciate you, Jordan. Thank you.
All right, that's Josh Lindke, the head football coach at Otsego. We will see you back here next week.
Line it up.